We all have many memories of Scott. He was a remarkable guy. And when I was thinking about Scott and what might be special to mention about him, there were many things that I could talk about. Scott was tall. Scott was handsome. He was a handsome guy. Scott had great hair. Scott had great hair. Scott had an incredibly gentle manner. When I think of Scott, and I suspect that many of us in this room, when we think of Scott, we think of his gentleness and his calmness and his thoughtfulness. But when I was really thinking about Scott, it was interesting what came through most remarkably was I also remembered his voice. Take a moment for those of you who knew Scott. Remember his voice? He had a very gentle, calm, amazing voice. Scott had a quiet voice. Scott had a great voice. Scott was incredibly insightful and intelligent. He was able to explain things, and he was an early pioneer in the interface of psychology and financial advising, in helping advisors explain things in ways that made things very accessible to people, to families, to therapists, as well as to advisors. Scott was a voice. Scott was an advocate, an early advocate for all the things that we talked about today. I mean, in many ways, we heard Scott's voice through everything that we talked about today. He talked about collaboration. He talked about understanding clients and advisors and families. He talked about bridging gaps. Today's program, just think about it. I mean, Scott was here today talking about empathy and collaboration and therapy and the self and the family. We talked today about all the things that were close to his heart and that he had written about in his book, in his articles, all those white papers. His writing was part of his voice, and thank God we have them. Scott's voice was not alone. Scott's voice was part of RayLigne, and his voice was among what we know from RayLigne and Greg and everybody who's been connected. We need to carry his voice forward. We, in many ways, need to continue, and by doing so, be the tribute to Scott by being his voice, to teach people to listen, to look for common ground, to teach and help people to find their own voices, which is what he worked throughout his career to do. Scott had a quiet voice. Scott had a great voice. And I hear it still. I think I always will. And I think what we can do as the best tribute for him is to continue it, to talk about and to teach the same things that he always wanted to help people with. So, it is not with sadness, well, not just with sadness, but with gratitude and appreciation, because I think that's what Scott would want us to focus on. That in a moment, I want you to raise your glasses to Scott But tonight, tomorrow, and with those that you love, tell them that you appreciate them, that you're grateful. Don't let a day go by without doing that for the people that you love, because life can be very short. So let's raise your glass to Scott.